So as part of the preliminary work around this project, we needed to determine, as we do with every other program, how are we going to evaluate how effective we were? How do we know that we made a difference, or we were going to make a difference with this mobile intervention? It's not good enough just to put out a program and invest time and effort in training unless we know or we have a reasonable belief that this is going to make a difference. So we need to define how that is going to make a difference. And we decided that there were really two groups that we wanted to affect here. One was clearly the participants. How does that mobile intervention help me achieve my health goal? How did it help me eat those 5 servings of fruits and vegetables a day? Did the mobile intervention help me in that? And how did it help me in that? So we wanted to measure that. But equally as important was our staff and volunteers, who were running up against resistance to residents meeting their health goals. And so what we wanted to do was create a way that we could motivate residents through our staff and volunteers, and for those staff and volunteers to know that this mobile intervention was really assisting them in helping the residents that they were trying to help. So there were two groups that we were really looking to measure: the participants and the effectiveness of the intervention process for our staff and volunteers. So the measurement methods are pretty standard. We use questionnaires at the beginning and the end, and during the program and at the end of the program. And we also use quantitative questions: the number of hours people participated in the mobile discussions, and whether or not they achieved their SMART goal. We also used qualitative questions: the strength of a participant's feelings about the effectiveness of this particular intervention. Did they really think that it really helped them, or was it just another nice thing to do, or even worse, was it just something that they felt obligated to do? So we really wanted to know how they felt about the effectiveness of this particular intervention. We're also looking for stories, how in fact the mobile intervention, how did that impact somebody changing their health habits? And the final one, once again, coming back to our staff and volunteers, how well did they feel that it benefited them in helping do their work? So once again, this is a little bit of detail, but what tools did we use to do this measurement? Well, we can measure off our existing WhatsApp pages. We use our current health planner, which you will see in other areas of this site. We also have a database where we record all of the information around our participants and their health goals and the achievement of their health goals. We are also able, through that database, to document the telephone discussions that we've had. The database was designed uniquely for this particular program. It is not a standard database. And once again, in response to a ground-up approach, the database was developed based on the needs of this particular project as it was developed. So those are the tools that we use to measure. So now we have a program. We know what the program is. We've been trained. We know how we're going to measure it. And so the next step in this process is decide how we're going to roll this out. And so once again, we agreed on this process through our staff meetings. And this is what we decided to do: that each staff person would identify 5 residents who they are working with and approach them to gauge their interest in this additional support tool. We didn't try to force this down anybody's throat. We didn't try to force this upon people, but we did ask our staff to identify at least 5 people that they were working with to gauge their interest in using the mobile app. And then we got into the actual program, the program structure. So once we found those people that were going to, that were willing to participate, we went through these basic steps in that initial phone call. What is the health goal? We've discussed that earlier in this process. So we came to an agreement on what that health goal was. What are the steps to achieve that? Maybe I'm only going to buy 1 apple in the first day and I'm going to end up with 5 servings within 4 weeks. So what are the steps for me to achieve that goal, and how am I going to find affordable food? So there are steps to do that. We agree with the resident on what the kinds of support that they require. Really, really important. Once again, we're not going to tell anybody that we're going to phone them 4 times a week to see how many apples they're eating. This is about them telling us the kind of support that they need, and we then develop our support around that. We also gauge the confidence in achieving the goal. Once again, it's easy to set a goal, but that goal, unless you feel some level of confidence that you can achieve it, can be very demotivating, not motivating. And then we had an agreement. How often would people like to call us? Once a day, once a week, once a month? That agreement came from the participant, the resident. And then once again, we took all of that information and we entered it into our database. And so that's how the program started. It's important that we continually try to understand how this project is working, what's not working, and how do we improve it. So what we did at our regular staff meetings, which we meet every week, we reviewed one case every week to see what we could learn from that case. We ensured that all the evaluation materials were completed, and we changed the program based on the feedback that we were receiving. So there was this sort of step process. We've engaged the people, and then we made quite sure that we looked at the impact of the project on the residents and whether or not we needed to change the program as we designed it. What we found through that process was that there were 2 major challenges, which are pretty obvious when you look at this. Those who really got into the program really benefited from the program, and they thought that the mobile intervention was very, very good for them. There was a second group who we had difficulty motivating to engage in the calls. And what we found is that took a lot of time and patience to continually work with them. We did not want to turn them off because they were not available to accept a call or they were not interested in taking a call. What we needed to do was just keep an awareness with them that this project was in place and that those goals were in place. So that took a fair bit of time and patience. That's one thing that we certainly learned from this. And then, quite frankly, our staff had some difficulty entering information into the database, and so we amended the database so that it became a mobile application itself, and that made it much easier for staff to enter the data. That became very important because if the data is difficult for the staff to enter, then they are not going to be motivated to follow the program. So where does this all lead? Where are we now? Well, first of all, we're in the very early stages of the program. What we found was all of that work that we've talked about today in this design and upfront work really paid off. It was a very smooth transition into the program, and we've started to gain data and participation very, very early. So getting participants to help us design the program, continuously engaging with them, doing a step test process really, really worked for us. Once again, those who use this mobile intervention really report really meaningful benefit. Once again, it takes time. You need to have a lot of patience to implement this project. And obviously, we proved what the best practices told us would happen, that there are clear benefits to providing additional support and reaching isolated residents. One of the examples that comes to mind is a resident that we have known in the neighborhood for 4 or 5 years, a senior who was not willing to come to our programs, but was willing to engage in us one-on-one if we saw them rarely in the neighborhood or we went to visit them in their apartment. They agreed to participate in the mobile intervention. And from that, over a 3 to 6 month period, what happened was that senior not only changed their eating habits, but they started to come out of their apartment and to participate in our programs. To us, that's the positive. That is a positive outcome. So we've dealt with the physical health issues, but we've also dealt with some of the social issues of isolation.